Hi, I'm Ian Berry, and my guest again today is David Ednie in Paris. David, welcome. And
Thank you, Ian. Good
we're
morning.
looking at your screen, David, so it's up to you to take us through today.
Okay. So today, Ian, I'd like to talk about sources of growth, and not in the true divergent sense of all those possibilities of innovation and new products and new markets and so on, but to look at our traditional customer journey and how we can exploit moments of truth in the customer's journey to capture new customers, grow faster, and to upsell and expand existing customers.
Right.
So focusing on the customer journey. If we think about the buying process for IT decisions, it's a very linear process, and it's about what we want to happen to the customer. So awareness, consideration, decision, purchase, and hopefully profits. But if we map that to what actually it looks like in the head of the customer when they're capturing information and moving around their buyer's journey or their buying process, it probably looks a little bit more confused, a little bit more chaotic, something like this. And the challenge for a company is, how do we know at what point the customer is to make available the right information to move them to the next step in their buying process? When it's a completely chaotic and non-linear process like this, it's very hard to optimize it or to automate it in any way. So we're looking to try and say, how can we simplify this to a model that is usable? And I want us to be thinking about using pivotal thinking, or more particularly circular thinking. And the circular thinking I'm thinking of is a customer journey, which I think would look like this. So it starts at the top at midday with search. We go online and we go to Google or whatever search engine we're using, and we type in what we're looking for, or information about the problem that we have, or the results we're looking for, or the product we think we want to solve our problem. We then find something. We then qualify, is this the right product for us? And if all those things are positive, all those steps are good, we go to the next step, which is to buy. And if it's an IT service, a software as a service, once we've bought it, then we activate it to start using it. So if we look at qualify, there's the usual steps we go through of evaluate, compare, self-qualify. We're trying to make sure, is this the right company that I should be working for? If I'm an SMB, is this a company that specializes in SMB business? Is this someone who looks like they're going to be able to support me, to give me the level of training or development support that I may need? And then we will select the party based on that. Activate is all about using and adopting the product. And we see this when we buy or use services online. Once we become familiar with them, usually we always go to them. That's our first port of call, and we become familiar with them, or we adopt them. And when we want to go to a spreadsheet, we go to Excel, or when we want to go to web search, we go to Google, or when we want to buy something through e-commerce, we go to, for example, Amazon. So the adoption is really a critical point for the provider, because that's where they can create fidelity in their customer base.
Yes, yes.
If we go then past managing the services to add-ons, which is where we can offer the customer the possibility to take more, to upsell, or to buy adjacent services, cross-sell, and there's a lot of scope in the software as a service space for that. And research shows us that most users now have, I think the latest number I saw was 3.4 software as a service applications. So that number is growing. And once we're on a platform, we can add on adjacent activities and upsell and cross-sell ourselves. We go support. And the big new one is renew. But after renew, if that's done well and we're happy, then we can become an advocate of the company or the service we're using. And this is where we can recommend, reference what we're doing to others, or what I call which is virtual word of mouth. That's probably the biggest thing, and we have whole websites that do that for TripAdvisor, for example, for travel and holidays and hotels. Complete virtual word of mouth platforms to spread the word. And so you find that the conversion rate from a recommendation is something like 98% compared to the recommendation of a salesperson. And it's extremely high, and it's at no cost. So if you can master the advocate stage, you get essentially an unpaid sales force.
Yes.
And I haven't met anyone yet who would say no to an unpaid sales force.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
So these moments are make or break moments, keep or lose moments, or multiplier moments. And that takes me to some research about capturing and engaging with customers as we go down that journey. So there's two halves: acquire and adopt phase, or half, and then a keep and grow. But there's been more research, some examples here of the different activities specifically to move from one stage to the other with self-qualify, purchase and pay, activate. So the learning point is that it's all about the customer and not about your products and services, which we all know, but sometimes we forget when we go into marketing, and certainly product marketing.
Exactly right.
How do you provide the right information at the right time based on where that persona, that customer persona, is in their journey towards purchase, and guide them down the right path? There's so many choices they have along the way to keep them on the right path to successfully completing a purchase. Activating, using it, and recommending it is the challenge. And avoiding barriers to purchase. There is so many steps along the way that if they're unsuccessful, the result is a lost customer. So we've got to focus on removing the barriers to purchase and providing a journey to success, and reminding people there's multiple ways to get one way forward.
That's a confusing sign, that one, in some ways, isn't it?
It is. It's my own photo. That's in somewhere in California, and I had to stop the car to get a photo of it. It was just such a intellectually challenging visual metaphor to understand. So my conclusion is there's many ways to one way forward.
Yeah, well.
So there's been a lot of research done, and here you can see some rather brutal research happening where they're injecting radio dyes into this poor candidate's brain so they can understand what his thinking is during the buying process, and then have a look at the results. And based on the smile of our doctor here, it looks like he's getting some really valuable insights into what's going on in their brain as they go through the buyer's or customer's journey. But Google have done a lot of work on this recently, but I think you're going to be able to tell us that actually this work started way beyond Google, and Google just updated it for the overlay of the digital journey. So let me talk about what I learned from Google, and then I'd like you to tell us about what your broader picture and understanding of it, set it in that bigger context. So Google said that a stimulus then creates a first moment of truth, which is when we purchase it, and then the second moment is when we use the product. And they said, but actually there's another moment of truth in between the first moment and the point of stimulus, which they call the zero moment of truth, and that is when we're influenced to buy what we're going to buy. So where the actual purchase decision happens prior to the first moment of truth, which is actually buying the product. And if we map that onto the buyer's journey, we see the first moment of truth is the decision time to buy. The second moment is to take it home and use it, or in the online space to activate the service. And I think there's some extra ones now. The third moment of truth is where you expand the product. That was the upsell and cross-sell. If the customer's happy with what they've got, then there will be a positive third moment of truth. There's a fourth moment of truth, which is renewing the service. Most of these are available on an annualized basis. So if you don't renew at the end of the year, the product sale stops. So that's the fourth moment of truth. And there's a final moment of truth, whoops, I missed this zero moment of truth, which is between search and find, which is where Google's very interested because that's where they own that space. And then the advocate, which is the F moment of truth, which I think I'm going to, based on your advice, change its name to the ultimate moment of truth, which is when you recommend or advocate or tell other people or provide virtual word of mouth information about your happy experience using the product.
Yes, I love the whole idea, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Well, then I've got some questions to come after that. So before we get to the questions, why don't you help us recontextualize the slide we're looking at here, the Google version of Moments of Truth, into the bigger picture as you were explaining to me just before we started the recording.
Yes, I like the zero moment of truth idea, and I think it probably does follow the stimulus and is that, before we actually get into the buying experience. But my understanding is that the F mot really would be next to the buy, and that's first moment of truth. Mm-hmm. And then S mot, which is second moment of truth, that's actually Procter and Gamble's idea. Uh-huh. And from memory, Google don't acknowledge that. They might, I just can't recall. But that stuff comes from Procter and Gamble. Mm-hmm. And so I then went on a bit further, and I discovered that the advocate piece, Brian Solis, the futurist guy, he called it UMOT, or ultimate moment of truth, when people start talking about their experiences. And so, that's just a little change. I also like final moment of truth, but I think it's probably right to acknowledge Procter and Gamble were in the buy advocate with first moment of truth, second moment of truth, and Brian Solis has covered it with UMOT, or ultimate moment of truth.
So I think that's very interesting, because I was under the impression that Google pioneered all this thinking, but in fact all they've done is remapped it into the digital world, which of course suits their interests, and it's something that precedes their thinking.
Yeah, they've built on Procter and Gamble's original idea. That's my understanding.
I can see that now. What I think I'll do is rename my FMOT to FUMOT for the final and ultimate moment of truth, which even is better.
I like it. It has other connotations, but I still like it. That's right.
Very good. So if we think about what are the questions that all this makes us think or takes us to, and when you look at your customer's journey, which areas do you think have the greatest impact on growth or impacting the customer experience, which have the greatest area or deserve the greatest level of investment, and which areas need the most improvement to drive growth and customer experience? And it's quite a big question, because when you look at how many interim steps there are before we get right round the circle, there's a lot of different points where we can apply leverage to, if that's our moment of weakness or the lowest level of conversion from one stage to the next.
Yes, it's pretty profound when you think, and particularly when you think about it from the customer's perspective, which is what we all have to do.
Yes.
I try, and every time I write something, I try and think about the audience, but it's not always easy. Or when we try and say something, it's got to be what, as a guy you'd probably know, Winston Marsh, his WIFM idea, what's in it for me. Mm-hmm. We've got to be articulating that all the time. In fact, that's his number plate on his car, Whiffham. So there you go.
Good for him. Good for him.
So yeah, I like the process, and I like the whole idea of circular, because pretty much nothing anymore is linear. So this is much closer to reality.
I think so, and it's manageable as it's sequential. If we go to that crazy, chaotic map of what we actually do, and if you stop and check yourself, at least I know it's true for me, when I'm interested in something, I'll go and look at a website here, and then I'll forget about it, and I'll come back and I'll read something else, and then I'll do a little bit of search somewhere else, and it's completely unstructured, it's highly emotional, it's non-linear, and it's chaotic, and that's basically the way we go about making decisions.
Yep.
And so we're trying to linearize it in a circular way, or sequentialize it in a way where we can make that process more structured and more effective to help the customer, guide the customer along the journey.
Yeah, which I like, and I think that in itself, realizing that everything's a small piece of a larger puzzle, is in itself a moment of truth. So it's a little bit here, a little bit then. As we've talked about before, how I use the idea of quantum leaps in my work. That is the true meaning of a quantum leap, meaning it's a small yet significant shift. It's the same process here. There's a whole lot of little moments of truth culminating in bigger moments of truth. Yep.
Very true. That's
Very
exactly
good.
the way it works.
Yep. You'd remember Jan Carlson's book of all those years ago, the ex-CEO of Scandinavian Airlines. Yeah.
Yes, I do. But I don't remember the point you want to tell me.
Well, the book was called Moments of Truth.
Oh, okay.
And he said that, if my memory is correct, there were 50,000 moments of truth every day in the business of that airline.
Wow.
And so that to me is just, it's a great reminder that there are lots of little moments that make up an experience in any business. And what you're saying here, which I think is quite profound, is that there are a lot of little moments that culminate in the buyer or the customer making decisions. And then after they've bought and experienced something, they're doing that again through that add-on, support, renew, advocate, process.
Yep, we think it's all stopped when the purchase is made, but it's not even halfway around the circle.
No,
that's a learning point. And if you think about then an organization, how should it be structured? In the old days, we had salespeople, and their job was to land the customer. So they were responsible for the buy piece, but they had no control over the previous steps before that, the search, find, qualifier. They had no control over any of the following steps either. They just owned the buy piece, which was to land the customers. With the software as a service, we now need to have a different role, a different job description, a different person in the company who owns renewal. Because if they're not when you've got lots and lots and thousands and hundreds of thousands of customers, when their renewal date comes, if there's someone not managing that, the slippage of people going off service and then trying to get them back and so on is massive, and it's a massive impact on your revenue, negative impact potentially. So we need to have a different animal, but the person who's good at landing won't be good at renewing, and vice versa. So they're two different roles, two different people, two different functions, and I think renewal is going to become a much higher profile activity and viewed as such in the internet companies and the software as a service companies of tomorrow.
And I think we're making an assumption, probably a correct one, that there's going to be a lot more kind of subscriber kind of things, or something that, I mean, even here we are on Zoom, I'm paying a monthly renewal to sustain the service.
So that's because of everything going digital, we don't have to own the asset. We can just rent it or pay for the usage of it. And so renewal becomes part of the consumption model now.
Yes.
It's we're moving from asset heavy businesses to asset light, where you don't need to own the asset, you just use it when you need it.
And you probably, like me, you've heard a zillion futurists say the same thing about how, the greatest hotel group on the planet doesn't own any hotels, and
exactly
that kind of thing that we hear all the time. So it is a totally different world, and yet the customer experience has always been what's important, regardless of the technology. We've now just got a customer experience that's on steroids when you think of all the different things that can happen or not happen.
And compounding the problem, customer expectations are rising all the time. So we expect even higher levels of experience, even though they're much more complex to deliver because of there's more and more different touch points, as we can see going around the customer journey.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So this is good. This is good stuff, David.
Thank you.
I wonder what people who are watching this are thinking would be their next step if they're wanting to embrace this.
That's a great question. Well, they can certainly drop me a line. I'd be happy to talk to them, as you would be, and understand where they think the opportunities for improvement, investment, and driving growth are on their buyer's journey, and how we could help them on that path towards world domination.
Indeed. Okay, well, I'm just going to stop the recording. We'll continue our private conversation, David, but right. That's been terrific. And folks, I hope there's plenty there to take away and plenty to talk to us about.